Welcome back to your next favorite episode of the Integrateness Podcast with Jason and Jolene. I am Jason.
And I'm Jolene.
How are you, Jolene?
I'm good.
Yeah, right?
How are you?
I think I'm good.
Well, yeah, Jason's had a busy couple of weeks here.
Yes.
He's been chasing ghosts and going on long boy road trips, and he's ready to hermit.
Right. Basically, yes, very ready to hermit. But the show always goes on.
Yes.
Unless there's like horrible life tragedies.
Right. Speaking of, we appreciate that the day I got in that car accident, we actually referenced my old car accident.
We did.
We even said the words, it's like it whiplashes you through something. I don't know. I literally jaw dropped, was like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, we recorded that thing like 7 weeks in advance. That was way earlier too.
It was. Yeah, no, because we're always recording weeks. Like this episode's going to come out in June.
Yeah.
So
we manifested that shit.
That's fun. Sorry. Right?
It was so crazy. I thought of that. I was like, I got to tell Jason that. That's nuts.
That is nuts.
Yeah. So anyways.
Oops.
Yeah. Oh.
This week, though, we're touching on a subject we have not yet ever really talked about.
We haven't given it an episode of its own. And this happened in a couple other topics that we found. We're like, gosh, we talk around it all the time.
All the time.
But we never actually dive into it. So we're doing the deep dive today.
On nutrition.
Yeah. And one of my favorite things is that we have Amy Pawliuk here from Wild Wellness Nutrition. And she has been a follower of this podcast since the beginning. And now it comes full circle because when we added onto our website, Become a Guest, she was all of that shit. And I was so excited. So this is like my favorite thing, is where we get to bring the community that we have here inside the podcast, right?
Yes.
Because we tend to, I notice this in my practice, but like we attract a collective, people who are kind of doing the same thing. They're on the same sort of level of journey that we are, right? No different than the level of yoga or boxing or martial arts or whatever we might be. They're on that same kind of level of life, right? So now people are able to, like, they've already been following along and now they get to join in and just mesh with that whole process.
Which is rad.
It's so cool.
To go 80s style.
So without further ado, we have Amy here. She comes to us from a hotel room today, actually. She's traveling. And that's a cool thing, is that all of her work, a lot of her work is virtual, hey?
Yeah, I can work with anybody wherever they happen to be. And then wherever I happen to be, I just give them a call and we take it from there.
That's
awesome.
That is like modern day entrepreneurship right there. This is like the online world is everything for people, because you're traveling with your husband right now for his work, right?
Yeah, I am. I just get to travel along and see all the other wives that get to travel along.
And make buck while you're doing it. All right. Okay, Amy, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourselves, all of you, all the versions of you, personal and professional, and then we'll kind of dive into what you think our listeners are really going to want to like bite their teeth into, pun intended.
So I operate on the premise that you wouldn't be putting diesel in a gas motor, right? And your body's not going to be any different. If you're putting the wrong fuel in for your engine, it's not going to perform as well as it should. It could completely fail. You're not going to put a quarter tank of fuel into your tank and expect you to get it across Canada. So like what we're fueling our bodies with is all our body has to go on. And I feel like it's a really key but missed and overlooked part of many people's health journey.
Interesting. So I don't even know where to begin. I guess continuing with what you're saying there. So in terms of nutrition, are there things that the body requires on a daily basis that maybe people aren't thinking about?
Vegetables. Eat real food. Like the number of people that I walk through slowly stepping into eating real food instead of food that came from a box it's really huge. And it's crazy to see how many people are not making a lot of their own food. And we only know what we've been taught. And mostly this isn't taught. We grew up in diet culture. We grew up with eat less, do more. Like if there's something wrong with you, like it's your fault. But we weren't taught how to fuel our bodies appropriately. Like our bodies operate within a very narrow window of tolerance, realistically. If you get too cold, you die of hypothermia. You get too high of a fever, you're also going to die. If your blood sugar goes too low, your brain has no fuel, go into a coma, you die. If your blood sugar goes too high, you're also going to die. Like we have a very, very narrow window of tolerances, and our body's really great at keeping us within that tolerance range because otherwise we die. And keeping you alive short term will always trump keeping you alive long term. So that's where our fight or flight system comes in, like way more than it should. We're cavemen running around in a not caveman world. Like somebody cut us off in traffic and your body prepares to fight off a dinosaur. Like you, it's not an appropriate response to what's going on around you. And we're no longer fueling ourselves to deal with all of the stresses that we're expected to deal with.
I think you nailed it there because we live, like you said, we grew up in diet culture and everything started to become faster. So when the microwaves came out, when packaged food came out, like there are like 10 times the amount of granola bar options now than there used to be, right? Like so many things come packaged that never used to for convenience, right? So people are not required, like they don't have the time to make their own food. And the other thing we're looking at is expenses of groceries. Processed food, high carb food, sugary foods are much cheaper than healthier foods for the most part, at quick glance, hey?
They really are, but you're in the long term, you're going to pay for it with your health.
Yeah.
And like the granola bar options that you said are available, marketing is ridiculous. You think you're getting a safe option or a healthy option to put in your kid's lunchbox, and a couple of them probably are, but most of them are just marketed in a way that make you feel like you're making a good choice.
Yeah. Okay, so Amy, we're going to kind of jump backwards a little bit and now talk about like what got you interested in doing this. What I know that you updated your education and you're always expanding into different realms of training and stuff. So just give us a little snapshot of what that looks like professionally for you. And then like what got you interested in this field, as well as who are you working with? Like who are the people reaching out to you?
So my background, I was a dental assistant for 15 years. I really, really liked that. I felt like it was a key part of my life's work was to work with all the little people, make them feel safe and comfortable and do their thing. But towards the end of that practice, my body started to feel terrible. Like I've always eaten relatively well. Like I grew up competing at a national level on the wrestling team. I'm an avid backpacker. I've run a few half marathons. Like
Yeah,
I
no
would
big
consider
deal.
myself a healthy person. And I would struggle with exercise induced migraines that nobody could figure out. I got to a point where I just felt gross. And I know that's not a very descriptive term. It was really frustrating that I couldn't describe how I felt in a way that made sense to anybody who could help me. Doctors looked at me and like, no, you're healthy. Like, what do you want? All of my labs were normal. Everything that they could do told me that I was fine. I felt like a hypochondriac essentially. But I would be hit with random waves of nausea to the point where I didn't have, like, all of my coat pockets, all of my purses have peppermints in them because I could be in the middle of, a grocery shop and I would need, not like want, I would need a peppermint to be able to get through the rest of that shopping trip. Like it's not normal to feel terrible.
No,
But
and I relate to that feeling 100%. I've had that too, especially if my diet goes to shit on a road trip or something. It's the best way to describe it is feeling gross.
yeah, it's just like this deep centered gross feeling that like it takes over whatever you're doing and it needs addressing. But all of my labs were normal. Everybody kept telling me that I was fine. So I took it into my own hands and I actually started out with an elimination diet. So you take out all the top allergens for a certain amount of time and you eat really, really, really simply for a while, just get back to your baseline. and then slowly reintroduce foods one at a time to see how that individual food was reacting with you. So like my body does significantly better without wheat, dairy, and eggs, which is what I was essentially living on before. And like most of us do, but bringing them back individually, I could see which piece did what. Dairy is responsible for my morning cough. Gluten's responsible for all my joint ache and general overall body inflammation. Eggs gave me really bad indigestion. But when you eat the things so regularly without the break, you don't have the opportunity to see which foods are causing which symptoms. You're like, no, I eat that all the time. It's fine. Because it's not an immediate reaction that you're having.
Genius.
Yeah.
So when you started getting interested in it, what made you legitimize it, right? Because obviously now you're a professional in the field, right?
Just it was life-changing information that I got from that, and it was not readily available to a lot of people unless like you go and seek it out. And even when you go seek it out, it's hard to find. And I wanted to help other people have the success that I had in it. And it really kind of kicked me in the butt to go and educate myself more on what I had always had an interest in. So I went and yep, go ahead.
Yeah, I feel that, Amy, because a lot of people identify with my work because they also know I've walked the walk. And for you to be able to say, like, I really recommend an elimination diet, or this is what I suggest, like your plan looks like for the week, or whatever you're working with people, they also know, like, oh yeah, she had to do this too. She gets how hard it is. She understands. And there's that practicality piece. You're also a mom of 2 children. Your husband has a busy business. You run your own business and you have other jobs. You have other tasks that you tend to. So you also know what it's like to be the busy, multifaceted individual trying to juggle this part of your wellness. And that's also your motivating factor is I have so much demanded of me. How do I optimally perform, I suppose, right? But knowing that you have walked the walk, I imagine is helpful in the work that you're doing with other people, hey?
It is, and it helps me realize and keep it in perspective, like big changes crash hard. Most of the time, we'll make small changes over time and just maintainable, small, realistic steps with people that build up. Like week to week, in the beginning, you'll notice a bunch of differences because when you start a journey, every little improvement is going to make a big difference to you. But then after a few months, you're going to look back and be like, how did I get here? Like, I feel like they were just such small little tweaks that we did. And if I compare myself to where I started, it's a completely different world.
I love that. Amy, are you a registered holistic nutritionist? What is your title?
So I have a diploma of holistic nutrition, and I'm a registered nutritional therapist.
Ah, amazing. Okay. Yeah, just because I know there's different sort of titles thrown out there, right? And you run a program. You run some programs, don't you?
I do. I have an elimination diet program that I've set up so that people can they don't have to think about it. They can just step in. There's different stages of the program. So there's like a very calm stage where all of the foods that you're eliminating are out. And then it walks you through like introducing each food as you go through with like weekly check-ins, making sure that you're on the right track. You've got the support that you need. And you just take it from there. It's really, really cool to be able to help people in that way.
Yeah.
So because I know like the right kind of nutrition and proper diet and eating the right foods is good for you physically, obviously, right? But how does eating and diet affect one's mental game?
Oh, it's huge. If you're not eating things that agree with your body, first of all, you're going to have an inflammatory reaction to it. And anytime you have more inflammation in your system, it's going to have an impact on your brain as well. You're going to have, foggy thinking. You're not going to be able to concentrate as well. It can impact your sleep, which most people don't associate their nutrition with their sleep. But if you're not sleeping well, your brain's not going to be working well. You're not going to have the opportunity to really clean house in your body like it should be, like repairing and resetting. So if your nutrition is impacting your sleep, that's impacting everything that you're doing.
And we've talked about that in a sleep episode where, you know, if your sleep is impacted, then you start eating like shit because you're looking for quick carbs, quick energy. You might be grabbing for sugary foods, the donuts in the lunchroom, all that kind of stuff. Less self-control too.
Absolutely. And that is directly backed up with science. Like one of the other areas that I'm really passionate about, other than like the elimination diet stuff, is blood sugar control. Like if you have spikes and crashes all day, it's going to impact your irritability, your mood, your mental health, all of those things. But if you have a poor sleep, your body's ability to regulate its blood sugar the following day, when you're tired, when you're reaching for those simple, quick choices, is not as good as if you had a good sleep. So not only are you more likely to grab those choices, they're going to impact you more negatively than if you were able to have that good sleep, make a good choice first thing in the morning, and then keep your blood sugar levels stable all day.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a really practical question here, Amy. There's no right answer, but give us like your best recommendation. So our listeners were up last night. It's Tuesday night. We got a new launch on Wednesdays and they're like, we can't wait for it. So people barely slept last night. Okay. Let's just say this. Okay. So now they wake up in the morning. This is going to happen. Their blood sugars are going to have a harder time regulating their body, their mood, all of this. What would be your recommendation for them to reach for first thing in the morning or to try and nutritionally plan for in their day?
Water is going to be huge. Your body needs water to do everything. Chances are, if you were up all night, you probably weren't making choices that kept you well hydrated. In addition to that, you're going to want to make sure that you have a good source of protein. If you're grabbing your carbs or whatever, that's fine. Your body wants carbs. Yeah.
I'm holding up a protein shake. I made a protein shake this morning and I brought Jason a Grenade protein bar to try because we also wanted to give Supplement King some kudos. And I would love to get your thoughts on some of these things, right? Like, because that industry is something else, right? So you're saying high protein. At this point, people are tired. What is more important, just getting the protein in, or is it a natural or like a man-made source of protein? Like, does it matter at this point?
No, I mean, ideally, you can be as picky as you want with a bunch of different things, but in the real world, we don't always have the luxury of being ideal, right? I would rather have you make a choice that's better than terrible instead of being, oh, I can't do the best thing, so I'm going to do whatever I want.
So I'll have a manufactured protein bar instead of the donut and coffee in the lunchroom. Like, better choice. Yeah.
Absolutely. Within that, of course, there's going to be better and worse choices within your protein bars. But if you have a high enough protein with what you're having there, it takes a lot longer for that to hit your bloodstream. So you're not going to have that spike and crash. And without that first spike and crash of the day, you're not trying to recover from that roller coaster all day long.
Amazing. So if somebody has a crap sleep or they're trying to get just something on track to like get on the right foot that day, pick protein first.
Yes. Yeah. Have a savory breakfast whenever possible, shit night or not.
What would you say is a good savory breakfast? Because I'm a big like eggs in the morning kind of person, a little bit of
If
bacon.
you're a person that does well with eggs, they're amazing. Unfortunately, lots of people react to eggs and they really aren't aware of that. So it's not an option for them. But for the people who can tolerate eggs, they're great. But we tend to think of them as like they only have 6 grams of protein per egg. So if it's your only protein source with breakfast, you probably want 3 or 4 of them.
That's usually
Like,
what I do. I usually get about 2 to 3 plus bacon toast with peanut butter kind of thing.
If eggs are an issue, like what would be a classic protein for you, Amy?
I'm a good smoothie person. I love my smoothies in the morning. Depending on if you can tolerate dairy or not. There's nothing wrong with throwing whey protein if you're okay with dairy, or there's lots of different vegan options out there as well for a protein powder.
There's a ridiculous amount of options, like too many.
Yes.
And I appreciate the ones that are low sugar. Pay attention to your sugar, pay attention to that stuff, right?
Yeah, that's a really important point to address as well, is you want to make sure that you're not loading up, even though the protein's there, if the sugar's also there, it's not going to be one you want to reach for.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a really great kind of piece. Now, I've heard things about like balancing fats and carbohydrates and things like this. Like from your perspective, again, you're looking at like the whole person and functionally where things are working for them. You're not necessarily looking at it from like a fitness perspective of here, I'm trying to lose this much and be in this competition, and here's what my macros and whatever that stuff is. So is that kind of like an accurate?
It depends. I will tailor what it needs to be to fit you. I have a couple clients right now that are training for ultra marathons. So their diet is significantly different than your average human. So it depends on what your goals specifically are. And then we're going to, you know, as you heal and move forward, our goals may change. We may start with an elimination diet to get the stuff out that your body does better without. Or, you know, if you've just been told you're pre-diabetic, we're not going to worry about what foods your body does better without. We're going to start by stabilizing your blood sugars. Whatever is, you know, key upfront for you at the moment is where we're going to start. And some people do really well with, you know, tracking their macros and measuring, and some people can't be bothered. Or not, that's the wrong way to put it, not can't be bothered, but that's a whole different system. Some people just want to be told like, okay, I'm looking at my plate. How should I divide it up based on what I'm putting on my plate, and take it from there? And it's really has to be tailored to what's going to work for that individual. You can't expect people just to jump into the mold and play along.
Right. So, and I really want to emphasize how individualized your service is, right? And once you're meeting with someone and you find out what their needs are, what their life is, you tailor it to all of that. But if we could zoom out and be like, okay, for the majority of listeners, let's say that people are all in this like mid-range, I want to start being proactive, or I want to be preventative in the sense of making sure I'm portioning my plate in a certain way. What would like what would a healthy portion of a plate look like, protein and vegetable and whatever wise?
Whenever possible, you want a good half of your plate to be vegetables. And then the other half can be like half protein, half carbs. Of course, that's going to be different. If you're training for a marathon, you're going to have a significantly smaller portion of vegetables and way more carbs so that you have more fuel. But most of us are not training for marathons. Most of us are just trying to get our kids to soccer practice, and half vegetables, quarter protein, quarter carbs, generally speaking, is going to serve you very well.
See, I disagree with you there, Amy, because I feel like our lives are marathons. Right? I mean, my ass and my waistline would not tell you I was training for a marathon, but fuck, it doesn't stop.
Yeah. It's a different kind of marathon.
Yeah. Okay. The other thing, because this is also a like area of specialty for you, is I want to talk more about blood sugars, because I actually think like, what are the symptoms of people who have fluctuating blood sugars? First of all, like what would flag for you when they're giving their story? Give us an idea of like what some of your first go-to tips are for stabilizing blood sugars from a nutritional perspective. And then if you can also, sorry, I'm stacking questions here. If you can also tell us how your knowledge here is applicable with your kids. Because let's face it, they're not going to eat a lot of the foods that you're necessarily going to prepare, but where do you find the happy medium with kids?
Okay. I find that when we have our checkups and things, high blood sugar is almost always talked about. If you have high blood sugar, if you're getting that blood test every 3 months, they're keeping an eye on it, you're aware of it. Whether or not you choose to do anything about it is up to you. That part is usually mentioned.
What is
they
the
don't
symptom,
ever
how
talk
would someone
about
know? How would someone know if they have a high blood sugar issue?
It's generally picked up on when you're at your checkups and things, but
what if
when you have low blood sugar, they don't really pay attention or care or notice. And I find a lot of people have low blood sugar issues and they have no idea that they're dealing with it. Quite often when it is high, like you were mentioning, like headaches are key to both ends of the scale. So you could be running too low, you could be running too high. Headaches are just across the board. Your body's mad at you for something and it wants you to figure it out. Quite often, if it's too high, you'll be urinating a lot more. You'll be really thirsty. Your body's trying to flush some stuff out of there. But when it's low, it's not consistently low. Our body's really great at keeping us alive. So if it goes too low, you'll have either a strong craving for simple carbs to get it back up, or you'll have a stress response within your body. And that stress response is going to shoot your blood sugar up. Your blood pressure is going up, and it almost always overshoots. So then if it's too low, it's going to skyrocket back up through the roof. Your body's going to overreact again and tank it again and just have this roller coaster effect. So like myself, it wasn't just the elimination diet that I had to get it under control. I'm also a reactive hypoglycemic. So if I eat in a way that keeps my blood sugar levels really stable, everything's fine. If I have something that spikes my blood sugar, my body is really great at getting it back down really efficiently, but it overshoots. And I find a lot of us do that. And it's not necessarily the blood sugar number itself that your body is responding to, it's how quickly it's changing. So if your blood sugar is going low really fast, it's that quick change in your blood sugar that's going to trigger the weakness and the shakiness, being dizzy, the nausea, the cravings to fix that before your body thinks you're dying.
Wow.
Interesting
Oh,
stuff.
I guarantee our listeners are like, oh, fuck.
That's me to a
That,
T.
like, I know I'm a hangry gal. I know that stabilizing my blood sugars is a struggle, but I have never tangibly tried to do it. I know when I have these spikes and lows, though, for sure, like, I'm unapologetically like open about how much I love my sweets. Yeah.
And I do too. You don't have to avoid them altogether, but like, sorry, I'll go back for a second. Being hangry is a key symptom that your blood sugar is out of whack. It needs some attention no matter what end of the scale you're on. If you're a person that gets hangry, you should probably pay attention to your blood sugars.
I don't go
that
anywhere
being
without
said,
snacks.
Yeah, no, snacks are amazing. I always have snacks with me. But I also love my candy and sweets. Like, I'm a normal human that eats junk food as well. I just eat like real food in addition to my candy. So like, if you're going to have that sweet treat, that dessert, have it at the end of your meal, not on its own. So you have the whole blood sugar stabilizing effect of all of the protein and vegetables that you just ate. And if you have your gummy bears at the end of your meal instead of while you are making your meal, it's an entirely different impact on your body. And at the end of the day, it's the same calories, it's the same amount of carbohydrates that you ate, but the way that you're eating them is making an incredibly different impact on the way that it impacts your body.
That's huge. Okay. Cause I'm going to give a common example of this. And then I did see our little time thing come here. So, okay. So we have 8 minutes before it really cuts us off, but we will be wrapping up here. A practical example of this is like last night. So we got home. I like my kids had soccer. I can't even remember what yesterday was. Yeah. Soccer. So then I was making dinner quickly and my kids were like, I'm hungry. I'm hungry. I'm hungry. Right. This is usually where I throw out like veggies or whatever that are in the fridge, but they wanted a popsicle last night. And I was like, you know what? Fine. Have your popsicle before dinner. And by the time dinner's here, because then I was like, well, now they won't stay up as late because that sugar will be in them and out of them faster. But that was a terrible idea, you're telling me, because they ate it before the meal. Not super terrible,
but at the same time, they probably just finished a bunch of physical activity.
Yeah.
Right. So your body handles sugars differently right after a workout than it does not. And even though it went into their bloodstream kind of quickly, they were recovering from their physical activity and then they ate their meal. So it's not going to crash quite as hard, right? If they only had that popsicle, they're going to crash hard. But because they had their popsicle and then like a full proper meal.
I appreciate that. That's huge, because that's the stuff people are looking at and they're like, how does the real life fit into this? And like you said, it is about the order, but it's also about what was your body doing before that, after that. And these are the things that people would be like paying particular attention to, just in their day to day, right? Like the good days and the not so good days. Well, what was different about them, right? I had the
Mhm.
same meal, but I felt different. Oh, that's because I worked out before this one or that one or whatever. Hey.
Yeah. Or even like your mental state when you're eating that meal. I find a
Yeah.
lot of people have trouble with lunch because they are just go, 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 go. They don't take a minute to actually sit and eat. And if you're too rushed, you're not digesting your food. It's going to sit there and give you indigestion and you're going to feel terrible all afternoon. Whereas if you sat for a moment and just like paid attention to what you were doing, you're going to digest your food better. You're going to, like, the few extra minutes that you spend eating your lunch will result in a significantly better feeling afternoon that you're going to be more productive with.
Amazing. One last thing before we touch on, because I want to call out Jason here and help him in whatever department he needs. And I'm thinking of your husband, Amy. Guys, or anyone who's like working hard, play hard. You know, Jason likes to enjoy his scotch or his whiskey at the end of the night, sort of thing. I don't know. Maybe your husband likes to enjoy some beers after some of his, like, you know, adrenaline filled work days. What's your recommendation on that? Like making sure you have the hearty meal with it. I mean, we know about alcohol absorption and harm reduction and those things, but nutritionally speaking, if they're gonna have the drinks, what's your recommendation?
Keep the sugar and mix as low as possible. So,
On the
like, if
rocks.
you're just having your booze on the rocks, that's probably a good choice. If you're grabbing like an IPA that's very calorie dense, you're going to want to make a few different choices around that, right? Or if you're having a rum and coke instead of your booze on the rocks, you have to keep in mind what you're mixing your booze with. We have a lot of good options for like unsweetened, like the nudes and things that are out there now.
Yeah.
Whenever possible, if you can avoid the massive blood sugar spike with your alcohol, then your liver only has to deal with the alcohol instead of also having to deal with your blood sugar.
Right, because alcohol in itself is a high sugar liquid. I mean, thing, right? I mean, it is sugars essentially, right?
Yeah, depending on what it is that you're reaching for, it's, yeah, very often going to have that impact on you.
Yeah. Okay. Because we don't want to take all the fun away from it. And that's the thing is you're like, how do we like make better decisions? How do we look at the longevity? How do we get through that short term, I'm trying to stay alive today and have it benefit longer in the long run? Yeah.
Exactly. It's just those tiny little tweaks because you need to enjoy now. If you're not enjoying what you're doing or how you're getting there, you're going to fall off the wagon and you're going to go right back to doing all the crappy things that you were doing before. So, like, nobody's going to expect you to be perfect all the time. You need to be able to enjoy the things that you enjoy and still enjoy them without feeling guilty about it and just being able to do so in a balanced way.
I love that.
Awesome. Well, Amy, thanks so much for joining us. In the minute or so we got left, where do people find you?
My website is wildwellnessholisticnutrition.com. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook at the same thing, Wild Wellness Holistic Nutrition. And I'm sorry, choking on my own spit there for a second. I have an email list that goes out usually about once a month. I like to send out an email with helpful tips and tricks and all of those sorts of things. You can sign up for that on my website or on any of my social media. There's a link there to join my email list. I would love to hear from you guys.
Perfect. And we will link and upload all of those things as well so that you can easily find her on our Instagram podcast page. And shout out to your hometown in case people don't know where you're from, Amy.
I'm from Valemount. It's my little valley in the mountains.
In British
Absolutely
Columbia
love
here.
it up there.
Yeah, amazing. I always like to give a shout out so people know because they'll be like, hey, she's close to us or I'm from there. And it's amazing how much familiarity has for people.
Yeah.
Thank you, Amy. This was really exciting. This was full circle because I know that you and your husband are avid listeners to us. So I appreciate you being on here. And yeah, I think that this is a big episode to bite into here.
It is. We will be back with more Amy, I'm sure, in the future.
Yeah, I think so.
I would
Awesome.
love that. Thank you so much for having me.
Anytime. And that wraps up this episode. We'll be back next week with your next favorite episode. Until then, I'm Jason.
I'm Jolene.
Talk to you soon.